Hi, welcome to the psychology presentation for this evening. I am at home. I hope no children are going to interrupt us. And yeah, my plan is to sort of take you through what study in psychology at A level entails. Obviously, it's a new subject. It's not something that students have necessarily studied before. So obviously, it's really important to be clued up in terms of what the requirements are. I'm going to start my presentation. I have got a video. Hopefully all this works. It is being recorded, and obviously I'm available to ask questions in school, or you can ping me an email. Okay, right. This hopefully this works smoothly. Okay, so that's my email. This is largely for parents. If you've got any questions about the presentation this evening, then please just ping me an email, okay? And I will do my best to answer any questions that you have. But hopefully this will cover a lot of the questions. I'm going to begin by showing a sort of a brief introductory video. Psychology is quite a diverse subject, and this might give you a flavour of what's studying psychology at A level, and also at degree level typically involves. Right, here goes. Let's hope this works. There. It's not liking that. I'm going to play it just from here, so you won't see the full slide, but hopefully you can see that at home. Okay, so hopefully that has whet your appetite for the study of psychology, and we'll begin with a definition of what psychology actually is, and it's the scientific study. Okay, that's quite important, of largely at A-level human behaviour, of the human behaviour and the mind, but it can involve study of animals as well, and animals are used a lot in psychology as perhaps more sort of more basic, not being disrespectful to animals, but perhaps to sort of study behaviour at a more basic level. So hopefully what you got from the video is that it's a super broad study, and a lot of students find that, you know, some love all of it, but some have particular love for aspects of psychology and perhaps other areas less so. So it's completely broad, and it's, I would say, I'd describe it, it's kind of got a foot in two camps. It's a science, and it's also a humanities subject, and as a result it kind of develops both those skills. So you know, the key skills that you'll go into develop are sort of scientific skills, analytical skills, numeracy skills. Okay, so there is quite a degree of maths involved in the study of psychology, but also at the same time, you know, your verbal skills, being able to write good essays, and being able to put sort of point of view across in your opinion. So it's a real valuable study in terms of this, you know, both sets of skills that it develops, and as a result it leads into a range of careers. So you know, it's really diverse what you can do with psychology, and a lot of our students do actually go on to study it further at sort of at university level, either as a psychology degree or sort of an allied discipline, sort of social sciences, criminology, that kind of stuff. So a lot of our students continue with it, which so I take as a compliment. So obviously some of the questions that were presented in the video we don't touch on, but some of them we do, and again, just to sort of prompt interest, if any of these questions sort of float your boat, so to speak, then psychology might potentially be an area for you. So these are all questions that we try to answer in psychology, and what we often find is that there's no clear answer. Yeah, there's such a wide variety of influences on human behaviour that it's quite hard to narrow it down to one thing. And so in terms of your understanding, you need to be a bit of more of a grey person rather than a sort of black or white, that is sort of one thing or the other. It's typically not. And very often it's down to evaluating what makes the best argument. So these are some of the questions that we look at. I'm just going to pick on one or two just to give you some sort of context to this. So for instance, fourth one down, how do individuals function with a split brain? It's probably not something that you've come across before, but our brains are in two halves. It's joined by a structure known as the corpus callosum, and that transfers information between the two hemispheres in our brain. Now, back in the 60s, before we had epilepsy drugs, one procedure that was undertaken if someone was particularly severely epileptic, they would actually cut the corpus callosum. So essentially, you have two brains. Yeah, you have two, because you've cut that communication between the two. And actually, what the research found was that we can function well with two separate brains. It's just when we're presented with certain tasks, then it begins to affect us. So you know, if you're trying to get information to the other hemisphere, it's sort of perhaps a visual and a verbal task that would be really difficult. Another thing that we look at is, do psychopaths talk a different language? There's some evidence that you can spot a psychopath by how they speak. So things like how they sort of justify their actions. And so one thing that you take away from psychology, if nothing else, is that we may be able to save your life. in the first place, okay, by spotting a potential psychopath. Actually, psychopaths are really successful. They're all around us very often. They're the chief executives in large organisations because of, you know, some of the traits that have made them successful. Okay, so psychopaths can be make very successful individuals when it's sort of channeled in the right way. Okay, so let's go into the course. That's more of what, you know, psychology is and what it teaches us. If we look at course content, this is a summary. Okay, so like a lot of A levels, we've got 3 components. So the first 2 are taught in the first year. Typically, we don't finish component 2. That carries on into year 2 because it's such a lot of information to get through. But as you can see, we have research methods, which I teach. Then component 2 is psychological themes through core studies, which McCallum teach. I'll give you a bit more detail in a second. And then in year 3, year 2 rather, we do component 3. It's quite a large component, and this is sort of split into 3 areas, 3 subtopics, which I will tell you about shortly. So, research methods, for a lot of students, this isn't what they sign up for, but it's essential to understanding psychological research. So during this component, what students study is basically how psychologists study human behaviour. Yeah, what are their methods? What's good about them? You know, how do they typically conduct research? Is it peer reviewed? You know, what about things like ethics? Okay, so this is what this first unit covers. I try to build in some practicals, so we try and do our own research to sort of make this stuff come to life. And, you know, also as part of this component, then we will be looking at sort of statistical testing. So yes, psychology does involve maths, and that is something that you go into sort of have to think about if you're considering us as a potential A level. Okay, you can't escape maths, people, if maths is not your thing. Okay, actually it's a really useful skill to have, I would say, in terms of developing your confidence in using data. Component 2 is huge. Okay, it's sort of the biggest component, and essentially it involves studying 20 pieces of research in psychology, which is linked to a particular area of psychology and a key theme. So what the syllabus tries to do is give you insight into the different prongs of psychology. Okay, so a biological psychologist will have different explanations for behaviour compared to a social psychologist. So we look at the 5 main areas. Under those areas, we study certain key themes. Okay, so for example, in biological psychology, one of the themes that we look at is brain localization. So we look at regions of the brain and what they're responsible for. Okay, so things like the hippocampus is responsible for certain types of memory. And then the second key theme is brain plasticity, and I find this concept fascinating. So we study a piece of research by Maguire, who actually found that London taxi drivers, London cabbies, they have to, I don't know if you know this, but you do not do sat nav. As a London cabbie, you have to do what's known as the knowledge, and basically it's equivalent to doing a degree on the sort of fastest and shortest routes around London, and so they have to learn all these routes and commit to memory. So when you scan London cabbies' brains, what you see is that their brain changes in response to their environmental demands. So hippocampal volume increases because so much demands are placed on their memory in terms of having to sort of navigate around the City of London. So that, you know, obviously the psychology is vast, we can't cover everything, but these topics are a really good introduction into what typically represents what social psychology is about, or what biological psychology is about. In the Taster sessions next week, we'll have a look at social psychology. Okay, so social psychology is more about the influence of other people on our behaviour rather than our biology. Yeah, so those are some of the things that we'll touch upon very briefly next week if you come along to the taster session. And then component 3 has 3 areas that I talked about previously. So the first one, this is my all-time favourite, this is that I love about teaching psychology. We look at mental health, okay, and we look at why people, have mental illness, and the reasons why, and how we can treat them via, different models. So the medical model would propose we need to sort of give people drug treatments to alleviate their symptoms of depression or anxiety, whereas more of a psychological approach would take more of a counselling route. So we look at, how to treat it, how it's caused, and also, the development of mental health, right? How it is, how it has had stigma and the reasons why that is, and that sort of dates back to historically to things like sort of being persecuted as witches, way back in history. Again, students love criminal psychology, so you have a chance to teach 4 options, 2 out of 4 essentially. So we've opted to criminal psychology and child psychology. Students love criminal psychology. Those are the 6 main areas that we study. So, for example, we look at things such as the halo effect in the courtroom. So if you're beautiful, you can kind of get away with what some of the evidence suggests is a short sentence. And so your appearance, your demeanour can influence, how legal proceedings proceed. And also things like imprisonment. Is it effective? Should we be locking people up? Should we be looking at alternatives? So yeah, students really sort of get their teeth into that particular one. Applied psychology, so I teach this bit as well. This is quite diverse, so it looks at child behaviour from a range of different perspectives. So, for example, there's evidence to suggest that intelligence is largely inherited, so it's something that we receive from our genes, from our parents and their predecessors at a biological level. We look at things like sexual development. I love this bit in that, if you were to live in a jungle for most of your life, it would affect your sort of depth perception. You'd have difficulty perceiving things on the horizon. You'd see them as small things rather than things in the distance because you've not had experience of things in the distance because there's all trees in the way. And we also look, another one that students really enjoy is looking at advertising on small children. So, there's clear evidence that the more TV kids watch, the more they put on their Christmas list. And some countries ban advertising. So a lot of the Scandinavian countries, because of the negative impacts, have outright bans on it. Other countries take a far more moderate approach. So hopefully through, looking at some of those topics, you're thinking, yeah, this is for me, this is what I'm really excited about. And that's such a key thing because you're studying this for 2 years, you have a lesson a day, you have to enjoy it. Okay, so my advice to you is find out as much as you can before you commit. You've not studied it before. Okay, just conscious of time, so just another 5 minutes. Hopefully that's not eaten into people's evening too much, but just a few things just to sort of finish off. In terms of how you're assessed, like a lot of A-level subjects, you're looking at 2-hour exams. So there's 3 2-hour exams at the end of A-level. And as you can see, the questions are, the paper's fairly evenly weighted. The component 1 is perhaps worth slightly less, but they're all, they're accounting for around a third of your marks. And the way you're assessed, again, like psychology, is varied. So you're going to have multiple choice questions, you're going to have short questions. When you get into component 3, you're just going to have essay questions. So you kind of need to be a bit of an all-rounder. And obviously on component 1, section C on component 1 is the maths bit. So there is a sort of mathematical component as well to the assessment. How it works, typically we are very buoyant as a subject. This year we have high 30s in terms of, you know, overall cohort numbers. So we're looking typically at 2 A-level classes with around, I would say, perhaps 15 plus students, okay, typically. So we attract a lot of students, I suppose equivalent to perhaps biology, English, so those kinds of numbers. We recommend, like other A-level subjects, that, you know, there's a hefty commitment. We teach you for 5 hours, but you should be putting in a similar level of effort beyond the classroom, okay, in preparation for the university and independent study. That is crucial. The teaching split between myself and Miss Hallam, as I've explained. She teaches more of Year 12 content, I teach more of Year 13, and all schools on Jersey follow the same spec, the OCR specification. So that's quite nice in organising things like cross-cultural, you know, sort of cross-school events when it allows, not in a pandemic. But yeah, that's useful to know. We do pride ourselves typically in offering an awful lot of extracurricular activities which students really benefit from. Some of these obviously we haven't been able to run for sort of going on 2 years now, but Brain Day is popular, so we invite over Dr. Guy Sutton, who is a neuroscientist, and he packs his suitcase with sheep brains and he dissects them, and we learn all about different parts of the brain and what they're responsible for, and also sort of cutting edge stuff in sort of neuroscience. So he's done a lot of research into sort of schizophrenia and brain regions. So that's really good, and students really enjoy that day. I'm trying to arrange a visit to the prison later this year for Year 13 to see the facilities. We go when it's in in sort of lockdown, which I think is a Wednesday afternoon. So students can go along and look at some areas of the prison and talk to some of the key staff there, including the forensic psychologists. We've had magistrates' court visits in the past as well, so all that helps with the study of sort of biological and forensic psychology. Typically, we do 2 off-island trips. So we do a London trip, and it's jam-packed. So we obviously fit in a bit of shopping, but we're primarily there for, as it says, Sigmund Freud Museum. We try to attend a conference if we can. We do a phobia workshop. So, you know, be prepared for handling tarantulas. Don't have to handle them if you don't want to, but sometimes a tarantula is present in the phobia workshop. We visited Bethlehem Museum of the Mind just outside of London to look at the sort of history of mental health, and students always enjoy the Jack the Ripper walking tour that we do in the evening around the East End of London, and like I say, intermingled with shopping and pizza and that kind of stuff. We offer, usually a Vienna trip, we try to run it around Christmas, so there's like Christmas markets on and a bit of Christmas shopping, and we visit things like this sort of social psychology. We go to visit a concentration camp, Mauthausen, which sort of fits in with sort of social psychology and obedience and sort of the terrible things that humans can do. We visit Freud Museum again, and there's a Museum of Visual Illusion, which is really fun, and there's a There's Fool's Tower, which is the oldest mental hospital in Western Europe. So we visit there and have a look around there. We also have a psychology academy in the spring term, and we invite people on island that are kind of involved in psychology in some way. So those are sort of some of the speakers that we've had previously. We run support sessions via psychology clinics. If you need help with divorce, then we're there to help over lunchtime. And students, particularly if they want to apply to something like a psychology degree or related degree later, we encourage them to enter the island's essay competition, which is an annual thing, and we've had some really good entries from students on all wonderful sort of psychological topics. Finally from me, and I know I've overrun slightly, but one thing to consider is, you know, what you need to study psychology. Okay, so I know there will be questions on this. Essentially, psychology, you need to be a good all-rounder. It's both the humanities and a science subject. So you kind of need to be good at all those things. Okay, so you do need a good standard of English, which is, you know, usually actually achieved by students at JCG. Okay, students come out with really high English grades, so that's typically not a problem. You know, your science needs to be of a reasonable level. Maths, just to clarify, okay, ideally we would like a 6 in maths at GCSE. However, 5 is not catastrophic. 5 is fine. Okay, under 5, then it's a bit problematic. Okay, so essentially 5 preferably, 5 is fine. 6 preferably, 5 is fine. And what you have to bear in mind, like I said, a lot of our students go on to study beyond A level. And what you find when you get on to, you know, looking at university courses, psychology at A level, at degree level, you will find that an awful lot of competitive degree courses will want at least a grade 6 in maths as well. Okay, so that's something to bear in mind. It's there for purpose. We're not making it more difficult to enter, but you do need to have mathematical skills to sort of cope with the data analysis and the statistical testing that we do as part of research methods. Yeah, so just bear that in mind. I'm just going to skip back. That's all I wanted to say, but just to leave you with, like I said, the presentation will be available for people, but that's my email. And if you've got any questions about the presentation, then obviously just pop me an email. Students can pop into R24 and ask me there, or Miss Hallam in R25, and we can answer any questions that you have. And I would strongly encourage you to do the taster session next week. We're running 2, usually just we're so popular and we can't fit people into the room. There's too many people, so we choose one of the 2 sessions that are on offer next week. And that is me done. So I wish you a good evening, and I hope that has been helpful. And hopefully I'll see a few faces next week, and maybe even beyond that. Okay, thank you for listening. Have a very good evening, and goodbye.